Good afternoon and welcome to the AICPA Town Hall Series. We greatly appreciate being with you. We've got a fantastic program today, so let's get right into it. But first, just let me cover a couple of housekeeping items. You all know you can earn CPE. All you need to do is click on 75% of the pop-ups that will show up throughout today's event. At the end of the event, you can get your CPE certificate by clicking that blue button. But don't worry if you don't get it at the end, we will be sending you a follow-up email. You also can use this bottom toolbar to download materials and to ask questions. And you can resize your window to better viewing of the PowerPoint slides and the video. And we're going to have a lot of video today. We've got a great group of presenters. Once again, I'm Eric Askerson, the CEO and president of CPA.com, AICPA's subsidiary. We're going to be introducing these other presenters as we go through today's webinar. And we have one additional guest, Ed Carl, the VP of Tax from the AICPA, that's going to be sharing some of the latest tax developments. What we do every week is we bring to you the latest developments, the best available information that we have. And this is one of those sprint weeks. There's a lot of things happening with our elected officials and down in DC. We've been very active with the lending community and payroll communities, and we're going to be talking to Renee Lacerte more broadly about what's going on related to digital platforms and this move to the virtual world that we're all living in actively. But what we want to do now is kick this off by bringing up Congresswoman Fletcher, and Mark Peterson, who leads our advocacy area at the AICPA, is going to conduct some Q&A with the Congresswoman. So welcome.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Thanks for teeing that up. I'm excited today. I get to have a conversation and spend a little time with Representative Fletcher. Congresswoman Fletcher represents the 7th Congressional District, Houston, Texas. First Democrat to represent that district since, I think, 1967, first woman. Moderate swing district. She has to be close to business in that community, and has had her fingers in the pulse of some of the issues that this group has been talking about over these months as we've been looking at PPP. We're going to get to Congresswoman your bipartisan efforts around deductibility, but I also wanted to take this opportunity to talk about the potential for maybe another round of stimulus and some of the discussions that are going on. Obviously, it's fluid from day to day and press conference to press conference. But I just wanted to see if you have any insights. I know you've been very much a forceful voice for a second round of stimulus for business. Any insights or thoughts on kind of where we are with the potential for another round?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to speak with you this afternoon, for including me in your program. I'm really glad to be here. And of course, you have asked the question that is on everybody's mind. What comes next? Of course, the PPP loan program has been vitally important in my district and across the country, as have all of these other elements of the first stimulus package. Certainly, in addition to the small business assistance that I know we're going to focus on today, just the direct economic impact payments, the unemployment insurance has been critical, the food security, expanding SNAP, and seeing the need in my community here in Houston and across the country. We know that people across the country need help right now, and I am very much an advocate for passing an additional stimulus package. You are right. I mean, I probably should have been on my Twitter 5 minutes ago to see the latest, and it's incredibly frustrating for those of us in the House who have been working on this, and frankly, who have been anticipating a lot of these needs since the spring. And of course, we passed our first bill, the HEROES bill, way back in May. And then we passed an additional version, a revised version of the HEROES bill last week when I was in Washington, putting forth the things that we think really are the priorities. I am hopeful, I remain hopeful that the conversation will continue, the negotiations will continue, and that we will see an additional round of stimulus. There are so many critical needs, and I think that the federal government really is in a position to be able to try to help meet those needs and get us through this crisis, which has lasted longer than the initial legislation may have anticipated in terms of the scope of need. And so I'm very, very hopeful and continuing to work. In fact, I've been on email and on the phone with a lot of my colleagues today, talking about what else we can do to keep things moving forward. I know the president announced yesterday that he was done negotiating, but has walked that back a little bit today. And so I'm just hopeful that we can see something move forward. And I know that that is the consensus amongst my colleagues in Congress, that we can put together a meaningful relief package that addresses the many needs that have come up and that are with us because of this pandemic, so that we can address the impacts to our lives and our livelihoods, and that we can get our arms around the virus. We can have a strategic and smart plan moving forward, and that we can help our people across our country recover from this pandemic, and that we can move forward together. We have a lot of ideas about how to do that, but we really do need another package right now. So I wish I had a better insight for you, but I can tell you we are still working and we're not giving up.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And what we've been saying in these town halls is it's not if, it's when. It's just trying to find the opportunity where the politics meets the opportunity as we move forward. So, we talked about the stimulus package and what would be the status of the negotiations in a legislative vehicle. But within that, we've had a number of bills, heroes skinny, heels skinny. But one of the issues that we've been talking about each time there's been one of those is PPP deductibility. It's been a lifesaver. PPP has been a lifesaver, a lot of congressional intent, a lot of support. You've been a leader working in a very bipartisan manner with a large group of members in order to figure out, how to get that fixed. How do you see that playing out, and how are those discussions going?
Well, I think that those discussions are going well. And as you mentioned, yes, I'm the lead sponsor of the Protecting the Paycheck Protection Program Act of 2020. We have 3 Democratic sponsors. It was included in the House passed HEROES Act. And then we have a similar bill that Rep. Holding has introduced. They both effectively serve as companion legislation to the Senate bill, the Small Business Expense Protection Act. And I know that AICPA has endorsed all 3 of the bills. But the question is really important to the small businesses in my district, and that's really where we got the idea. So as we move forward with the legislative responses, it is important to understand and think about the real world impacts and the real time impacts for these small businesses. And like I said, this has been a lifeline, but people expect to continue and carry on and they were expecting to be able to get the funds to meet their expenses, but to continue to rely on the deductions that they have taken in the past. So this would ensure that the loan forgiveness under the Paycheck Protection Program would not otherwise affect deductible expenses for businesses. And I know that it's not just my district, but throughout the country that people are struggling with this issue. So as I said, the HEROES Act passed in May, and it was again in the updated HEROES Act that just passed this week. So I'm hopeful that whatever final package gets negotiated, or whatever subsequent legislation, unfortunately, we're at a place where the impacts of this pandemic are not fully, we're not fully past it. It will be a while. And so there will be this next package, and I expect there will be additional legislation. But I know for the folks that I've talked to in my community, it's really critical that we continue with this. So I'm hopeful our leaders will recognize the importance of the issue and will prioritize small businesses by passing it, both the HEROES Act and this specific provision.
That's great. Well, thank you for your leadership. And we do know that you're very engaged with the business community, small businesses. I understand you were putting together some panels and town halls specifically with restaurants, small businesses. And part of that discussion is you got to get them into these programs like PPP, but then there's the other end, which is the forgiveness end.
Right.
And that's something that, we've been working on providing tools, the AICPA has. And we talk about that on these town halls. And there is discussions about, trying to figure out how to streamline that process. But, on the forgiveness side, based on the conversations you're having, do you have any thoughts around that? Because that's a big discussion. A lot of the questions we get on these calls.
Yeah, it is. It's a complex process, and I think that we're seeing the effects of writing legislation and figuring out how to interpret it fairly quickly, and also seeing changes, and seeing where maybe the initial guidance from Treasury was not what Congress intended, and sort of going back and forth. And I think certainly, the loan forgiveness process with the PPP loans is really a complex response to a complex issue. And so we have been trying in my district to work with the SBA. Of course, that's something your congressional office does anytime. And I hope the folks who are listening know that you're a member of Congress. If you're in my district in Texas or anywhere across the country, your member of Congress is there to be a liaison with different federal agencies. And certainly in Houston, we've had a lot of activity with the SBA because, of course, we have unfortunately had several disasters in recent years. We've had a lot of SBA disaster loan programs, and certainly this counts, unfortunately, for so many of our small businesses as yet another disaster that they are managing through. So we've held webinars that have been particularly helpful. Our Houston region director, Tim Jeffcoat, has been very helpful, very available, both in walking people through the application process in the first place, and then now the forgiveness piece. And what we hear the most are questions about who's eligible for different programs, how they can participate, and then also how we can sort of address how they've spent their funds, how they've used them, whether they still qualify. And the big question, of course, for so many people is whether they'll be eligible for another round of funding, whether that's something that we'll see going forward. So what I would suggest is to look at your members of Congress as resources as well for your clients or for you in kind of getting through some of this stuff, because we have a liaison to the SBA who can help. We have liaisons across the government because there are so many open questions. And I think right now, how do you fill it? I mean, it's very basic questions. We get a lot of, how do you fill out the forms? How do you know which one is right? What do I do if the rules change from when I got my loan in the first place to the amended versions of the bill and, the extension of time. And so there are a lot of very, very specific technical questions, but I've got 2 people in my office who are working pretty much full time helping small businesses and helping them address these questions and be a liaison to the SBA to help get those questions answered.
Well, thank you for doing that. And just to let you know, we've actually been working with SBA as well to put CPAs, in the loop there as well, to try and figure out how we can help businesses, navigate these issues. There's lots of decisions to be made, and it doesn't sound like it, but Washington moves quickly sometimes, and they did actually that first bill, right? And then it left a lot up for regulation, which meant that the good news was it passed quickly. The bad news was that they were kind of regulating on the fly, FAQs rolling and things like that.
Yeah.
So, speaking of that, we work very closely with the Texas Society of CPAs, our partners in the states, phenomenal partners. Is there, outside of PPP, when you look at what's kind of going on in your congressional district or Texas, there's other things in these relief bills as well, like, relief for the airline industry. That's one of the big negotiations that's going on right now. Are there other issues out there that you're seeing from your perspective that you see as vital or are very important, or you're hearing about that need to be addressed?
Well, I do think there are a lot of vital issues that I'm hearing about that need to be addressed. Of course, we've talked a little bit about small businesses, and they continue to need assistance on many levels. I mean, certainly the cash flow challenges that they had, especially here, because we took so many steps to try to mitigate the impacts of the virus early on. That meant, whether it was in our restaurants, which Houston is, of course, famous for our restaurants, and we have so many wonderful places to go, whether it was sort of changing their whole business model to doing, takeout only and to go only, or needing to close, trying to keep people on the payroll, because that's really important continuity. And I think we've seen that that's one of the real benefits of the PPP program. It's also one of the benefits of the program with the airlines, which of course is still being negotiated, but basically it keeps people on the payroll. That said, there are so many people who haven't been able to stay on the payroll, and so we are seeing the need for that additional unemployment insurance. We are also seeing a great need for folks to be able to get that additional economic impact payment, because there are a lot of people who are maybe able to go back to work, but they're not able to go full time. They're not making as much as they were making. And what you see and what I've heard from not just my constituents, but also from our local elected officials here is the role, the crisis that that's creating in housing, whether it's renters or homeowners who are having trouble making their mortgages or making their rent payments. And I think one of the things that this pandemic has shown us is how interconnected our lives are. I mean, they start with the threshold issue, how interconnected our health is, how much that when we are trying to combat a virus that's transmitted through person-to-person contact, through the air, through conversations, we want the people around us that we are encountering in many contexts to be healthy. And we want them to be able to stay home when they're sick. We want them to be able to get the health care they need and the tests that they need. And when I talk to business owners, especially, they want to make sure their employees are healthy. They want to make sure they're able to have health insurance. So that's been a huge issue that obviously this pandemic has really shown us is really at a crisis point. And I think it's really shown some of the challenges that already existed when it comes to things like access to capital. That's one of the things we saw with the PPP program, that some people found it easier to get their loans than others. Some small business owners who already had a line of credit, already had a banking relationship, were just able to move through the process more quickly. And so making sure that there's sort of a healthy health piece and also a healthy economy and access to participate in our economy. Those are some of the real challenges that I think we've seen and that I think we can address moving forward. But as we talk about the pandemic and the short and long-term implications, thinking about how we work together to meet the needs of the people throughout our communities and across the country. I think those things that we're seeing where people are really living at the margins, people are struggling to put food on the table, to keep their roof over their head. We've heard for so many years how so many people are living paycheck to paycheck. And we see in a moment like this how dire those consequences are. And so I am hopeful that we can address those big picture questions and also address the immediate needs that we hear from constituents in my district and around the country.
Well, there's many initiatives in this that we're very, very much supportive of, and we've been advocating on Capitol Hill with you, as you know, on deductibility, but several other issues as well that we think are important related to nonprofits and several others. And again, we stay optimistic that either there's a deal before the election or post-election in a lame duck session, even if it's not a big one, that maybe things like deductibility or some level of PPP second round could possibly happen. So we try and stay optimistic. I want to thank you, give you a chance to wrap up if you have any other comments you'd like to share with us.
Well, I just want to thank you for including me, for inviting me, and of course for the important work you're doing. I think that one of the things I have learned in this first term in Congress is how important it is to have partners and experts who understand the complexities of the legislation that you're looking at, the unintended consequences, the things that you might not be thinking about. And so having advocates engaged in every stage of the process, both to help raise issues and also to help solve problems, is just critically important. And I know how much you are doing to help think through, what I always, tell people, because sort of coming into this job, I was a lawyer before I got here. So I really appreciate CPAs and people who can do math. I was a history major. But I also think, we need that expertise, and we need people who understand complex issues and who understand the various implications of things, really engaging in the process. And so, if I could say one other thing, it's engage in the process when it comes to legislation, which obviously you do, and hopefully everybody on this call understands the importance of that. But engaging in the system more broadly, I can't take the opportunity enough to just remind you to make your voice heard this year in November. That's another really important way to participate. Whoever you support, whoever you're voting for, just make sure that you vote and participate in our democracy, because our democracy only succeeds because of the participation of people like you and people who care about what's happening in this country and engage with lawmakers and with people across the country to help make our legislative efforts more successful, to help our neighbors in need, and to help make our communities thrive. And I know that that's what this group does. And I'm very grateful for your partnership and look forward to a continued conversation on these and other issues. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks to you, and thanks to your team, both in Texas and in the Washington, D.C. office. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Y'all take care.
Take care.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Congresswoman Fletcher. So that was fantastic, a great strategic discussion. So what I want to do now is bring Renee Lacerte up for another very important strategic discussion. What we've been talking about the past many months is that this is a public-private partnership. And I can tell you, you're in for a real treat here. Renee Lacerte is someone who has played a huge role in the business community and with the profession. For the past 20 years, he's been building solutions that have been empowering firms to better support their clients. 20 years ago, he started PayCycle. That is the engine behind Intuit's online payroll platform today. 12 years ago, or around 12 years ago, he started Bill.com. Bill.com is the leading payments provider for firms in the US. There's over 5,000 firms leveraging it. They have 100,000 small business clients, doing over 100 billion in payments. The list goes on and on. But even more importantly, it's just the role. Renee's a good friend of mine. I've known him for 10 plus years, and he is so committed to helping firms really build success with their clients. So I'm going to start this discussion off with Renee, just on a little bit about, his entrepreneurialism, and he's a purpose-driven guy. So Renee, welcome, and I want you to share with this audience, the purpose and behind the creation of Bill.com to start off our discussion. And Renee, you just unhit mute. My producer, unmute Mr. Lacerte there.
There we go. Yeah, sorry.
So welcome.
Some technical. I just wanted to make sure that there was a little bit of fun in here. So, anyways, thank you for having me on, and thank you for the partnership over all the years. The accountants are near and dear to my heart. I had both my grandmothers were accountants. My great grandfather was the chief accountant in one of the counties in Canada. I worked at Price Waterhouse. My parents had a lot of businesses that served accountants. So for me, the serving and giving back and helping accountants be successful, it's just near and dear to my heart. I think there's a tremendous amount of value that comes to SMBs across the country because of the value that accountants are able to bring to them. So the passion can almost be started, and I think I've shared the story with you with the night that I was born, right? So the night I was born, my parents had a data processing company in DC, and my mom wasn't feeling well. And my dad said, well, let's finish this job and then take a long weekend. You take off tomorrow and you'll have a long weekend. And it was the defense contractor through the largest accounting firm in DC that they had as a client. Anyways, my mom was 110 pounds carrying around punch cards that were 50-pound trays. She got the job done, and at 2:30 in the morning, I was born, right? So this passion for helping accountants and SMBs goes back to, really kind of my whole life. My parents have a number of businesses that supported accounting firms. And ultimately, what we do and what I really understood to be a problem when I started PayCycle was that it was not simple to connect and do business. I had learned from my parents, my grandparents, that cash is king. You stretch out the payables, you pull in the receivables. And then after working at Price Waterhouse and seeing companies, try to do that manually, and then working at Intuit and building software to help companies do that, at least the front office digitally, when I got to running my own business with PayCycle, I found that the back office was no different than my grandfather's 60 years earlier. And so I started thinking about how could that be different, because the internet is more than the internet. It is the cloud, which is how we refer to it now. And the ability to have all the documents, all the collaboration with your accountant, with your employees, with your customers, with your vendors, all the payments integrated, have all that in one spot, in one database to kind of connect all those entities. The light bulb went off and I started focusing on this in 2006. And so, the mission's rooted in a family history of supporting SMBs, being close to SMBs, feeling the pain that SMBs have, and knowing that accountants are a huge, huge asset to the SMB everywhere. And so I think one of the things that, that I focus on is how do we help accountants move from the transactional to the strategic? The transactional nature of getting a tax return done, or helping somebody file a payroll, return, or whatever that is, or even paying a bill, is quite transactional. And if you can make that part of the work really easy, so that you as the accountant and the firm can actually step up and say, look, I've seen this story before. And that's one of the great things that I loved about being an accountant at Pricewaterhouse, was that you see so much across the economy. You get a chance to really understand how everybody runs their business and what happens in their business, and to take that experience over years of lots of interactions, and to give that experience back in strategic thinking to the client. That's when I got really jazzed about our partnership, and really saying, how can we help make this happen? How can we help accountants be the strategic value to the client, the customer, and not the transactional value? So that's just, maybe kind of the background on why I started the company and how we got to where we are.
Well, you've done a lot. You've done a lot over the years. Let's bring this slide up that, Renee, you and I have talked to on stage on many occasions. And this is, we have a lot of firms that are on this call. We've got thousands of firms on the town hall today. I know a lot of them have built sophisticated client accounting practices, CAS, or virtual CFO. But there's probably some that are thinking about this. And I want you to reflect on what you've seen in this pandemic related to this category. But just for the audience here, I mean, this pre-pandemic was a high growth strategic area. Now it's turned into a high growth strategic area, and it's a must have. Firms really do need to have this service to be able to support their clients. And what we've been doing over the past decade is really preparing firms. A lot of firms, Renee, have thanked us for how we put together strategies and plans and moved the bookkeeping practice to the forefront of the firm, to this virtual CFO CAS area. So you can I just wanted to share this slide. I mean, we're, in Bill.com and others are thinking about pre-accounting and post-accounting as we really build out this cloud accounting and payments engine. So what I want to ask you, and you and I talked about this earlier, is what have you seen? What have you seen from some of your firms that had CAS practices, and some of the firms that are saying, you know what, I got to get going. I got to get going fast. You can drop the slide here. Thanks.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've seen is exactly what you said, which is becoming essential. You can be strategic, which everybody wants to lead and be in front. But I think COVID and the shelter-in-place orders showed how essential it was to be able to have your back office in your back pocket. And the reason I say that phrase is that the back office is a physical location, or always has been. But now we realize that we don't have to be. We've been in COVID. I've been working remote in this guest bedroom for 8 months. That's a long time, right? and yet the company's running, it's growing, it's having great results and all that. And when you realize that you can actually work now, I miss the people, and we've had some socially distant happy hours. But when you realize that, business is going to be different going forward. And what we saw immediately in the beginning of March, when the shelter-in-place orders really started happening, maybe March 15th, March 17th, when that started happening, what we saw was that accountants were there for their customers. And so the firms that were already on the platform, they had customers come to them saying, I need help. How am I going to do this? We had some firms come to us for the first time saying, I got 20, 30 clients that are asking for help because they can't be in the office anymore. How do we get this done? I've been thinking about this. And so I think what we've seen is, this need to digitally transform your business. The awareness of it has gone to a different level. And I think the conversation that I'm hoping is happening for firms across the country is, how do you be at the effect of technology versus the effect of technology? How do you affect your clients and their growth and your own growth for your firm versus being at the effect of technology? And that's what embracing technology is, bringing the clients on, moving to that strategic position. And we're seeing that happening in part because of COVID.
And Renee, just real quickly, I saw some survey that you did recently, which one data point I found interesting was that firms that and businesses that were really energized about digital, investing in digital, were projecting a much higher percentage of growth than businesses that were not. So it's a mindset, it's a capability you have to have, but it's also a mindset, and it's driving results.
And I can give you an example that we used on our last earnings call. So the number one dog walking app in the country is a company called Wag. So I'm sure some of the folks attending have used Wag to help walk their dogs. Well, you have shelter in place, everybody's home. Who's going to walk the dog? Well, the owner's going to walk the dog, right? And so they saw their revenue decline 70% in 1 month. At the same time, they had the accounting firm on our platform. But at that point, they then rolled it out to everybody in the company that was, ordering and creating expense for the company. Within less than a month, they cut their expenses by 50%. They were able to add a new revenue stream, which would be vet consultation over the web like this, and they survived, and they're doing well. So it's becoming paramount. It's essential that your businesses, all the businesses out there, have digital ease and transformation happening so they can be in front and really make their business and their dreams come true.
Well, Renee, we're seeing that. We're seeing just the focus around business model. I mean, there's one chart that we'll show at the end, we show every week, where initially firms were helping their clients around the shutdown and business relief, which is continuing, but it's really all about the business, adjusting business model, working on cash flow projections. So just you're a payments leader. What are you seeing around payments as we close out 2020 and go into 21?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the overall theme that I would say is that businesses are heavily and very resilient. I think every accountant knows that. But we weren't sure back in March, right? And so when we had our May earnings call, what we shared was that we had seen that payment volume had dropped, enough that it was measurable, right? So it was very clear that businesses were not paying all the bills. All of our customers, were being very careful about which bills they paid, just like the story I just gave. And what we saw by the end of the second quarter, which is our fourth quarter for the year, what we saw by the end is that it had started to turn. Businesses were starting to actually pay a few more bills than they were before. And what we've shared to date is that they're not yet back to the pre-COVID levels, but they are recovering. And I think that just shows and speaks to the resiliency out there, that businesses have found a way to stretch out the payables and pull in the receivables and make the cash flow work. And I do this when I go out and I'm in the community, whether it's my dentist or a restaurant. I ask folks, how are you doing? Like, what's it like? And typically what I'm getting from the hard hit businesses is that they're probably 65%. That seems to be the number, somewhere between 55 and 70%, but 65% of what they were doing beforehand. Well, that means it's still a going concern. They've changed their expenses to manage it. And they're ready for when they can open up inside, not just outside, right? They're ready when patients are not going to be worried about, the virus, and they want to go in to see the dentist because it's such a joy to get your teeth cleaned and all those things.
Well, Renee, I mean, I want to just ask a closing question here, but before I do, I just want to, let the audience know that I remember you and I getting on the phone back in March before even the CARES Act was passed, and you were thinking about, we asked, we went to you to say, how can money get distributed effectively to the business community, and you helped out then, and your team has been helping out the firms over these past many months. But even more importantly is what you did over the past decade to get firms on the cloud. I mean, the cloud. You and I remember how many meetings we were at, and just saying that this is the new way of doing business. And it's good that we had so many firms leveraging the cloud prior to the pandemic, and then what we're doing right now. So just anything you want to, any thoughts to close with to this town hall. I look forward to having you on future town halls as well.
You bet. I think the main thing for the firms that are thinking about how to really help their customers, not just today, but in the future, I think the digital transformations here, I think it's an opportunity for firms to embrace technology so that they can use it to move themselves into the strategic thinking that is where the most fun is for any of us to do. And so COVID is something that we're all managing. I think part of that managing is that we're now in a position that I think there's a new way of work, which is called a hybrid model. And when we go back to work, we're not expecting everybody to be in the office all the time. We're going to let people work from home if they need to for certain days or whatnot. We're going to hire people remotely, and that will be okay because we know how to make that work. And so I think if you think through the ramifications of that, I think there's probably an impact for firms out there to think about how they can be additive and actually have more fun doing their job. So, and happy to be here and happy to be a part of the ecosystem. I think it's a vibrant part of the economy, and I think it's a huge asset that our country has, is that we have so many outstanding firms and across the country.
Well said, Renee. And the ecosystem's never been more important. So thanks for being with us today. We look forward to having you back, and I will be in touch. So thanks.
Excellent. Thank you.
So with that, we're going to keep going. We got a fantastic program here, and I'm going to bring Lisa Simpson up, and we're going to talk about latest guidance. And you got some last night, Lisa. So why don't you just get right into it?
Absolutely. If we can go to the next slide. Thanks for joining us. We do have a lot to talk about with PPP information. So last week we talked about factors impacting the timing of forgiveness applications, because we know that borrowers are getting anxious about applying, but there are some considerations that go into is now the right time, or do we need to wait a little bit longer? So we went through this last week, but I wanted to bring it back up to you because we've got a new FAQ, or I'm sorry, an SBA procedural notice that came out about one of the items. We also have some new information. So really quickly, is the loan over or under the dollar amount of any potential threshold for simplified forgiveness? I'm seeing lots of questions in the chat about where are we in terms of conversations about streamlined or automatic forgiveness. Right now, we're hearing that there is a lot of pressure to streamline forgiveness, and the number we're hearing is around 50,000. We believe that that's not going to be automatic. So let's be really clear. It's not just every loan under 50 grand is automatically taken off the books. But we do think that based on what we're hearing, it will be a streamlined process with some administrative responsibility and also certifications that the borrowers are going to need to make. So keep your ears open for that. We obviously will communicate as quickly as we can. Twitter, LinkedIn, we'll try to get an alert out to you if we see anything pop on that. Lots of questions continue to swirl around the timing of deductibility of expenses. So I'll refer you back to our August 20th town hall with Ed Carl. Ed's going to join us a little bit later, but we're going to talk more about IRS operations since we have already covered that topic. Is the lender accepting applications? More and more lenders are, and we actually are hearing that the SBA has gotten some through their process and have actually gotten money back to the lenders to pay off some loans. It's very slow, it's a trickle, but the lenders are excited to see some progress coming through the system there. If we go to the next slide. So this is the procedural notice that came out. So let me clarify. The number that we're hearing right now on simplified forgiveness is 50,000. That doesn't mean that it's not going to commit at 150. Just telling you what the word on the street is right now. So this is a big deal because we started getting lots of questions about a borrower who needs to have some kind of equity transaction, and they weren't sure what to do with their PPP loan. So the SBA released some guidance for the lenders this week, October 2nd, and I guess that came out Friday. So there are a lot of details. It's a 5-page procedural notice. So, and your lender should know if this is of relevance to you, then take a look at the procedural notice. The hyperlink is at the top, and you can go through some of the details here. If you go to the next slide, I think it's important to point out that under the terms of this procedural notice, the original PPP borrower remains responsible for the obligations under the loan, the certifications about economic necessity when they took out the loan, obtaining, preparing, retaining all of those PPP documents. So even if you get forgiveness, you've still got a requirement to save those records for several years. Prior to the closing of any ownership transaction, make sure that the borrower has notified the lender and gotten approval if needed. On the next slide, we talk about some of the different variables. And again, that 5-page notice will give you some of the details on that. It's going to depend on whether or not the note is paid in full, or I'm sorry, forgiven, I apologize. What the percentage change in ownership is, if it's 50% or more, there's some different requirements. The structure of the transfer. So is it a asset sale or a transfer of ownership interest? There may be a need for the borrower to fully fund an escrow account for the full amount of the loan. Talking with some lenders today, they have been trying to structure their deals this way if there was a need to process a sale of a PPP borrower, but they are concerned that maybe not all lenders have been doing that. But that's a pretty substantial heads up that you need to factor in. And then the lender will work with the SBA on processing their approval if needed. The SBA does not need to approve all changes in ownership when a PPP loan is involved, but there are some thresholds to factor in there.
As we know, this is one of the key drivers of applications right now. So this is what the lenders are telling us. Most of the applications, a lot of the applications coming in are when they're selling the business. So that obviously causes a change in ownership.
Yeah, and lenders have been trying to prioritize those
Yes.
to help their clients out. Last night we got an FAQ number 52 for those of you counting at home. And this is a good one because again, this is good for the borrower. We had consistently been getting questions over the past few weeks about why is my lender saying that I have loan payments due when you're telling me that payments are due until 10 months after the end of my covered period. So gets a little, you have to go back into the history books way back to June when the Flexibility Act, the PPP Flexibility Act was passed. And that had, that extended the deferral period from the original 6 months to 10 months after the end of the covered period, or whenever after the SBA processes a loan forgiveness application and remits the money back to the lender. Some lenders still have loans on the books that have that 6-month deferral in the actual note agreement. So there was some confusion about, is it 6 months or is it 10 months after the end of the covered period? This FAQ very clearly says that the extension of the deferral period automatically applies to all PPP loans. So lenders have to make that modification to their process. They do not have to modify the promissory note. Some of the lenders that we've talked to are saying that they probably won't make that modification to the promissory note. They might wait until the forgiveness process is, that borrower applies for forgiveness and a decision has been made. If there's a remaining balance, then they'll modify the note terms. I've given you a hyperlink to the FAQs. Go to the last one and you'll find the text if you have any additional questions or if you need to talk to your lender about that.
Well, Lisa, thank you. We got lots of questions coming in, and I tried to answer a couple while you were just speaking.
No, Eric, come on.
So we'll be bringing you back during open forum. So thanks. What we're going to do now is pivot to a topic that I'm seeing a lot of questions on, and that's around the IRS, Ed, and there's a big deadline coming up in about a week. So Ed Carl, can we bring you on to give us an update on what's going on with the IRS and the upcoming tax deadline?
Thanks very much, Eric. I do want to spend a moment or two to let you know what we're seeing with the IRS, and also hearing from our members and put that together a little bit. After shutting down earlier this year, the IRS just is not back up to normal service levels. And frankly, this is no revelation for anyone, but normal was challenging for everyone. So you can imagine at the degraded levels they're at now, with the pandemic requirements that they have, that it's not a surprise that there are problems. Now, if you can imagine, they're getting about 1 million pieces of mail a week, 1 million pieces of mail a week. And so when they were shut down for several months, that backlog grew and grew. And so they went up to about 11 million pieces of mail of a backlog. They've worked that down to about 5 million pieces, about half of which involve tax returns. And it's funny, Eric, I think we're going to have to enlist you into the tax advocacy team. You and Renee were just talking about how critical a virtual strategy is for our members. Can you imagine how critical it is for the IRS? And we're talking about the main problem is sorting mail and getting through mail. So what are we hearing from members? So Lisa mentioned this, I think maybe for the last couple weeks or a couple weeks ago on a town hall. If your client says or asks you, should I cancel a check? The answer is absolutely not. Do not cancel any checks that have gone in. It's the backlog. The backlog is causing the problem. The IRS can't get through it. If they're asking you if they should submit a return that's been previously filed by mail, say no. The answer is no. Now, interestingly, I got a call from a member yesterday dealing with the NOL carrybacks that are really important for a lot of businesses, to get that refund, to get into their cash flow. And they're not able, the IRS is not able to get through that, what they said, 2.5 million backlog of paper returns that they have to process. Now, what this one member said to me was he had called the IRS told him to fax it in. Now, that's interesting because they had stopped most of the faxing services, but the refund was so large, I told them to keep notes about who they spoke to, when they spoke to it, and send it in. It could create a problem down the road, but when your client is due over $1 million of a refund and the IRS tells you to fax it in, so fax it in. They just have to be careful about doing that. Another area, we're talking about a digital strategy, the central authorization file backlog. So they have, they're talking about a 15 business day backlog of working those CAF submissions. 15 days is unbelievable. The normal was unbelievable. The normal was a 5 business day of processing. We're trying to work with them on digital improvements to that system, including digital improvements for the signature process. But as you can imagine, with this deals with powers of attorney. If you're dealing with powers of attorney, ID theft is a big issue for IRS and something that they're trying to be cautious about. But we're trying to work on that. Just to mention, IRS has said that they've pulled 3 notices, the CP 501, 503, and 504. They deal with balance dues on return. So as you can imagine, if you e-file a return but you mail in the check, you're automatically going to get a notice. And I know that some CPAs have said they've gotten those, but the IRS has pulled the plug on those. Hopefully minimizing the confusion, but they've pulled the plug on those. Now, one thing we heard about, I heard this morning on the CARES Act payroll tax deferral, it's the employer's share of the payroll tax. And there may not have been a large pickup on that, but there are many employers who took advantage of it. And some are wanting to pay back that payroll tax deferral early. And there is a problem that we're hearing because that 941 form does not have a special line to accommodate an early payback on that. So we're trying to work with IRS to get some kind of an accommodation, some kind of change to the form, because IRS, when they're getting the early payments, is somehow the system is thinking that it's a late payment and assessing a penalty. So that's really a crazy thing that we're trying to get around. Eric, why don't we go on to the next slide? A big issue that we heard from our members on September 15th, and now it's normal to come up on October 15th, which is just next week. So we have heard from quite a few members who are still having challenges because of the pandemic. We've reached out to the IRS, had quite a few conversations. They are sympathetic, but have not put out anything formal just yet. I don't know if they will. We're still trying to push them to put out something formal. But what they've told us informally is that if you put COVID-19 on an attachment to a return with some kind of an explanation, or work with your software provider to get the codes that come out in a disaster situation, they're available, and there's a link on this page to get at the bottom of this slide to get the FEMA declared codes that you could put on a tax return. The software providers account for this. Put it on a return. It'll put COVID-19 at the top. If you've made a good faith attempt, but you just can't get all these returns done. I'm hearing from a lot of CPAs in that boat. I'm hearing from a lot of CPAs who do not want October 15th extended, but some CPAs are challenged. If you work with these codes, IRS will be lenient in waiving penalties. It's possible they won't issue any penalty at all. If they do happen to issue a penalty, they'll be lenient in waiving those penalties. So I would suggest that you look for the information. There's a link to a longer story that came out over the last couple of days. Link to that story and get the information. Just in wrapping up, I'll tell you that there are state conformity issues, but also state help. So some states, a good handful, I think 12 or 13 or 14 states have provided additional time beyond what the federal extensions or the federal deadlines are to file the state return. So that could be some kind of an assistance to you in finishing up the state return. So focus now on the federal, then get to the state returns. There are several reasons for doing that in addition to COVID-19. So take a look at that. And then the last situation, we know there are disasters. Unfortunately, the Gulf Coast is about to be hit again. Louisiana, I think this Hurricane Delta is tracking in the same direction, almost the exact same direction as Hurricane Laura tracked in late August. There were already extensions in many parishes in Louisiana, in counties and other states. So take a look at the IRS tax relief website that's linked here. You'll see that there are already extensions to the end of December and even into January for a lot of returns. So that's it, Eric.
Well, thanks, Ed. That was so stay with me and we can bring Mark and Lisa back up. So busy time, busy tax season time, busy business relief phase with the forgiveness applications, and everybody staying informed on where PPP2 is going. one thing I just want to quickly reflect on, there are capabilities that are being put in place to support the business relief. I look at the questions coming in, we're getting hundreds of questions, and we are at a stage now where you can leverage a platform to help give you guardrails. And I think you've got the AICPA guidance, you got the forgiveness calculator, now you've got this automated tool. So when I look at some of these questions, I almost want to respond and say, let's give you the technical answer, and then you also could leverage a platform. And one thing that we're trying to do here in the town hall, we cover a lot of information, but we're trying to balance the strategic side of the ecosystem and information with the technical side. So once again, for some of you that are just trying to get your arms around the forgiveness process, leverage technology, leverage these tools that have the AICPA guidance built into them, machine learning and AI, something that can really help you with your practice in this time of workload compression with all that's going on. Real quickly, we just want to keep everybody informed that the .CPA launch continues to go well. We've got thousands of firms that have applied. This is we do have a deadline here. This is driven by the governing body of the internet, ICANN. We need to have these early applications in by October 31st. Go to domains.cpa, reach out to us if you have any questions. We have actually people there on supporting live chat, and we also have email addresses that you can connect with us through. So Mark, I think we'll get to this. This was your cheat sheet with the Congresswoman. A lot going on. Clearly, you don't need to memorize everything for your clients. I mean, I think that the thing we keep stating is a question of when, not if. So get ready with capabilities. Even that tool that I just highlighted, the PPP tool, we are going to support phase 2 or next phase PPP loans through that. So that's another reason to really think about putting tools in place. So we can just go to the 4 squares here. We don't need to have the slide. Lisa, I know you've been looking at the questions. Let's just take a couple. And again, we thank you for these questions because we take them back and this drives our resources. So Lisa.
Thanks, Eric. I'm going to take the first question, then Mark Peterson, you're up on deck. So one of the questions that we've been getting quite a few times in the chat is about when a borrower needs to apply for forgiveness. There is no mandate that a borrower apply for forgiveness. There is no deadline. After 10 months after the end of the deferral period or the end of the covered period, payments will begin. They will be required by the lender. If a borrower doesn't want to apply for forgiveness, they don't have to. They just start making the loan payments. So I just want to try to clear that up a little bit. Mark Peterson, next question for you. We've got a lot of people working from home in a different state in this environment. What relief options do they have?
So we've for a long period of time we've been working on workforce mobility language. So if you're de minimis standard, you're over state lines for less than 30 days. Let's have a de minimis standard. We have not been able to get that over the finish line. There is new legislation that's actually made it into several of these packages that have moved along that would just focus that to, during the pandemic period of time. But when you think about, healthcare workers and all of the people that have been working over state lines, that's a major focus for that going across state lines. If you're talking about, me working at home, there has been interest in figuring out how to provide other deductions and relief for that as well. So both sides, if you're going over state lines, we've been advocating for that, and then they're trying to figure out how they give support to folks that are working from home as well.
So Lisa, Mark, thank you. With that, we're going to hit what we usually hit at the beginning, some of these. So let's bring the slides back up. You can keep the panelists here. We're going to go just talk about our resources. Here's a resource page. These are the summary categories of what's on it. This is what Lisa and our team worked tirelessly on. All of the past town hall series are available for your viewing. You can forward these to others. You can quickly fast forward to the section that is most relevant for you. Lisa, quickly, anything on these next two slides you want to highlight on our FAQs?
Just as a reminder, if we didn't get to answer your question today, look at this. These are our most commonly asked questions, and then you've got the FAQs that you can download in your materials. And we've talked about a lot of these throughout the course of the day. I do want to hit one more really quickly, Eric.
Mhm.
Lots of questions about should borrowers go ahead and apply for forgiveness. It is a borrower by borrower decision, and it will be based on a discussion about those topics that we listed on that slide earlier in the presentation. There is no blanket answer that now's the time or now's not the time.
And what we can tell you is there's only 2-3% have actually submitted forgiveness applications to the SBA. So there's a lot of businesses that are waiting. So that is as we've put out in blogs and in articles, that's an appropriate strategy. We did implement this improved registration process this week. So we auto-registered all AICPA members that had attended an AICPA Town Hall series. So you do not need to register every week. You will be receiving an email from us about your registrations in the next town hall, and you can add this to your Outlook calendar. One thing I do understand that there was some technical issues with some people getting online today. We apologize for that, and we'll look into that. We're going to make sure we continue to give you a great experience here and bring you the latest information on what's happening so you can better support your firms and your clients. And we also know there's lots of members in business and industry that attend this, and we welcome you as well. So our next town hall is scheduled for October 22nd. If something comes up, we'll do a special edition like we have in the past. So the next one right now is 2 weeks from today. Please do stay tuned on our LinkedIn and Twitter accounts. We appreciate your engagement. And we've shortened the town hall survey to 5 questions. We got some feedback on that. So it's only 5 questions. It'll take you about 1 minute to fill it out today. Thank you very much for your time. We look forward to staying connected. Have a good end of the day.